What happens when the man who saved thousands on screen couldn't save the one person who mattered most? At 73, Liam Neeson carries a weight invisible to cameras. His voice has commanded storms and silenced rooms. Yet, behind those ocean-deep eyes lives a story of loss so profound it would break lesser men. From poverty-stricken Belfast to Hollywood's golden halls, from boxing rings to broken hearts. This is the journey of a man who learned that true strength isn't about never falling, it's about standing back up when everything inside you wants to stay down. This isn't just another celebrity story. This is about what it means to survive when survival feels like the hardest role you'll ever play. Born on June 7th, 1952, in Ballymena, Northern Ireland, William John Neeson entered a world still recovering from war's shadow. His family were working-class Catholics in a predominantly Protestant town, where religious tensions ran deeper than the nearby rivers. His father, Barney, worked as a school caretaker, sweeping floors in buildings where his own children couldn't afford to study. His mother, Kitty, cooked in school kitchens, feeding other people's children while stretching every penny to feed her own 4 kids. Their 3-room house held walls so thin you could hear neighbors breathing. Winters crept through cracks in the windows, and warmth was a luxury saved for the coldest nights. Young Liam shared this cramped space with his 3 sisters, Elizabeth, Bernadette, and Rosaline. While they filled the house with chatter and laughter, he remained the quiet one, watching more than speaking, listening more than sharing. His Aunt Molly's kitchen became his sanctuary. She was the only person who seemed to truly see him, to understand that his silence wasn't shyness, but something deeper. Years later, he would recall how she always listened with genuine interest, offering comfort without judgment. That small kindness planted seeds that would bloom decades later in his performances, where listening became as powerful as speaking. At 9 years old, Liam's father worried that his son's quietness might harden into something darker. He enrolled the boy in a church boxing club, hoping physical expression might unlock what words couldn't. The dingy hall smelled of sweat and determination, where working-class boys fought not for glory, but for identity. Liam discovered he had natural talent. His long reach and surprising speed earned him 3 consecutive youth championships by age 14. But boxing demanded more than skill. It required a hunger for combat that Liam simply didn't possess. He fought to please his father, to prove he belonged, but never because violence felt natural to him. Then came the night that changed everything. During a match, an opponent's punch connected with devastating precision. The world went silent. Then, white. When consciousness returned, sound came back, distorted and terrifying. His brain just went, as he described it years later. The fear was overwhelming and absolute. That night, without ceremony or explanation, he walked away from boxing forever. His father's disappointment hung heavy in their small house, but his mother's relief was palpable. The experience taught young Liam something crucial about himself. He could endure physical pain, but the absence of control, the vulnerability of having his mind scrambled, terrified him more than any punch ever could. After leaving school at 16, Liam drifted through a series of brutal manual labor jobs. He drove forklifts, hauled cargo, worked construction, trading his youth and strength for wages that barely covered rent. At 17, he attempted university at St. Mary's College, hoping to become a teacher. But poverty has a way of interrupting dreams. When the money ran out, he left quietly, adding formal education to the growing list of things he couldn't afford. The early 1970s found him in Belfast, a city torn by sectarian violence and economic despair. He lived in a rented room, barely large enough for a bed, working multiple jobs just to eat. Sometimes he slept in his coat because heating was a luxury. He counted pennies before buying bread. And some days, he didn't buy it at all. Looking back, he admitted those years left him lost, broke, and angry with himself. Then, in 1976, at 24 years old, fate offered the smallest opening. He took a job sweeping stages at the Lyric Players Theatre in Belfast. It was janitorial work. Nothing glamorous, but something about that space spoke to him. The smell of sawdust, the echo of voices rehearsing, the transformation of empty stages into entire worlds. Within weeks, he asked to audition. His first role consisted of just 2 lines, but speaking them felt like finally being heard after years of silence. The theater became his education and his salvation. He lived in shared flats with strangers, often sleeping on floors, walking miles to rehearsals because bus fare meant choosing between transportation and food. Every performance was a prayer whispered into darkness, hoping someone might answer. Slowly, quietly, the world began to respond. By the early 1980s, he'd accumulated small roles in film and television. Excalibur in 1981, The Bounty, The Mission, Lamb. Each role paid just enough for rent or food. Rarely both. Casting directors found him too intense, too raw, too Irish. His eyes carried too much sadness for romantic leads, they said. He kept every rejection letter, not from bitterness, but as evidence that he was still trying, still alive. During these lean years, he met Robert De Niro, whose approach to acting transformed his own. De Niro taught him that stillness could speak louder than rage. That restraint carried its own devastating power. This became Neeson's signature, the ability to convey oceans of emotion through the smallest gesture or glance. Then came 1993, and a phone call that would change everything. Steven Spielberg was casting for Schindler's List and saw in Neeson exactly what the role demanded: charm mixed with strength, compassion haunted by complicity. The role of Oskar Schindler would make him immortal and nearly break him. For 110 days in Poland, he inhabited a man's guilt and grace. After filming the ghetto liquidation scene, he sat alone in his dark hotel room, chain-smoking and unable to sleep. The weight of representing such profound human tragedy took months to shake. The film won 7 Academy Awards. His face appeared on magazine covers worldwide. But fame, he discovered, doesn't heal loneliness. It just amplifies silence. Success brought new challenges. Michael Collins, Les Miserables. Gangs of New York were artistic triumphs that struggled commercially. Between 2004 and 2008, he poured nearly $2 million of his own money into independent films. Critics praised, but audiences ignored. He believed in stories that didn't sell, he said with characteristic understatement. Then, at 56, Taken exploded into theaters. What began as a modest thriller dismissed by studios became a global phenomenon, earning $223 million worldwide. The film transformed him into an unlikely action star, spawning sequels and similar roles. But the cost was brutal. 16-hour shooting days, constant travel, physical demands that punished his aging body. He joked about not being 25 anymore. But the exhaustion was real and accumulating. Behind the professional struggles lived an even more complicated story of the heart. In 1981, on the set of Excalibur, 29-year-old Liam met Helen Mirren. She was 36. Luminous, fearlessly confident. Everything he wasn't. Yet somehow, she saw past his rough edges to the gentle soul beneath. For 4 years, they built a beautiful, private world, together in a modest London flat. She taught him how to navigate rooms full of critics, without apologizing for his presence. "You belong here," she told him. But as his star began rising, rumors suggested he rode her fame, that she carried him higher than he deserved. Pride built walls where love had built bridges. The distance grew until one winter night, she said softly. "We were not meant to be together, but I loved you very, very much." Watching her taxi disappear into London rain, he felt something inside him close. "She was the first person who made me feel enough," he later admitted, "and the first to prove I wasn't." 4 years of loneliness followed. He buried himself in work, walking through empty streets after filming, passing bars filled with laughter he couldn't join. Then came 1988 and a film called Satisfaction, where he met 20-year-old Julia Roberts. She was pure sunlight, all fire and laughter. At 36, he was quiet and careful, still learning to trust joy again. Their romance bloomed against the backdrop of Venice canals and late-night dinners. She called him Old Soul, and he smiled because it was true. But her star was rising faster than anyone anticipated. Mystic Pizza, Steel Magnolias, then the whispers of Pretty Woman. Schedules filled. Calls went unanswered. Dinners were postponed indefinitely. There was no fight, no betrayal, just life pulling them in different directions. One evening, as she packed for another city, he realized this was goodbye. She kissed his cheek and said something he'd never forget. "You'll find someone who can stay." He didn't believe her then. Years passed, until 1993 brought Anna Christie to Broadway. Across from him stood Natasha Richardson, 30 years old, daughter of theatrical legends. With quiet confidence that comes from understanding how fragile applause really is. During rehearsals, the pauses between lines became their own conversations. By opening night, the line between acting and feeling had dissolved. Natasha's first marriage ended quietly. Liam wrote her a note he kept folded in his wallet for years. "You've made the noise stop." They married in 1994 in Millbrook, New York, under candlelight instead of cameras. "For the first time in my life, I can breathe," he told a friend afterward. Their sons arrived quickly. Mikhail in 1995. Daniel, a year later. Natasha glowed in motherhood, singing while cooking. The kitchen always cluttered with toys and scripts. Liam built a crooked wooden swing in the backyard that the boys loved anyway. They lived without spectacle. Summers in green hills, winters with long walks where nobody recognized them. Those 15 years were extraordinary in their ordinariness. Birthdays with lopsided cakes, snow piled against the porch, a dog snoring under the table. "She was my compass," he said once, "my home, my silence, and my peace." Then came March 2009, a day so bright it seemed immune to sorrow. Natasha went skiing near Montreal. A simple fall. A bump. Laughter. With instructors. She returned to her lodge. Hours later, the headache arrived and wouldn't leave. Liam was filming in Toronto when the call came. The word accident made the phone slip in his hand. He boarded the first flight north, gripping his wedding ring so tightly it left marks on his skin. At the hospital, a doctor's eyes apologized before his mouth did. Her brain is dead. Walking into her room, he expected breath, laughter, anything human. But Natasha lay perfectly still, skin warm, face serene, as if sleeping. He touched her hand and whispered, "Sweetie, you're not coming back from this." For hours he sat beside her, speaking softly. "You're safe. You're loved. You can go." He kept the promise they'd made years earlier, that if one couldn't return, the other would let them go. He nodded to the doctors. The machines stopped. The silence that followed wasn't noise. It was absence. Her organs were donated, saving 3 lives. Even in death, she gave life. She's keeping 3 people alive. He said quietly, "I think she would have wanted that." But when the machines stopped, something inside him stopped too. For months, he moved through the world like a ghost wearing his own face. "I think I died that day too," he confessed. "But I kept breathing, because she would have wanted me to." He returned to work because stillness was unbearable. "If I stop," he told a friend, "I'll hear the silence again." Films like The Grey became confessions disguised as thrillers. He fought wolves in frozen wilderness. But what he really fought was the cold inside, the loneliness waiting behind every pause. He tried love again. British publicist Freya St. Johnston smiled like someone who understood broken things. For 2 years, they built something fragile. But grief is jealous and doesn't share easily. They parted quietly. "I just wanted to focus on my boys," he said. The truth ran deeper. Some hearts stopped reopening. In 2024, when asked if he could love again, he answered simply, "No." It wasn't bitterness. It was tenderness from a heart that had already spoken its last line. His body carried its own battles. In 2000, a motorcycle accident shattered his pelvis in multiple places. Doctors didn't expect him to survive the night, wired together with bolts and steel. He learned to measure recovery in inches. The pain became a permanent companion, a low hum in his bones. Years of action films took their toll. Each stunt, each fall, each chase in cold rain extracted payment. "You can't fake gravity," he said. "You can only meet it halfway." After 60, muscle cramps came, sharp and sudden, leaving him gasping at night. He quit coffee. The pain softened enough to let him stand, to let him work. After Natasha's death, whiskey became anesthesia. A bottle at 6, another before midnight. But one morning he saw a stranger in the mirror and stopped. It wasn't helping. He said, "And I needed to show my boys how to keep standing." Now, at 73, Liam Neeson stands as a portrait of endurance. His net worth sits between $120 and $145 million, earned through over 100 films and countless voice projects. But wealth was never his measure. He lives simply, avoiding celebrity excess, preferring quiet dinners to red carpets. His generosity extends beyond personal comfort. He's quietly supported UNICEF, Amnesty International, and Make Poverty History, advocating for refugees and children in crisis. Those who work with him describe a courteous man, who measures worth by integrity rather than applause. His sons, now grown, anchor him. Michiel, who changed his surname to Richardson in tribute to his mother, works in fashion and film. Daniel pursues business and design. Together they form a small, close family built on understanding rather than tradition. My greatest achievement, Liam says, is not my films but the men my sons are becoming. Recent years brought whispers of companionship with Pamela Anderson, his co-star in The Naked Gun. Neither confirms a relationship, but the speculation feels poetic. A man who loved deeply might be allowing light back in.